April 28, 1945. The Third Reich was collapsing in fire and betrayal when a convoy of unmarked trucks rolled out of Linz beneath a sky blackened by retreating smoke columns. Witnesses described SS guards speaking in clipped, unfamiliar dialects and crates marked only with a black sun insignia. They called it Operation Eclipse. 2 days later, the convoy disappeared somewhere in the Austrian Alps. Allied intelligence intercepted garbled transmissions referencing cargo obsidian, but no one ever recovered the cargo or the men who escorted it. In the silence that followed Germany's surrender, a question lingered. What was so valuable that an empire carried it to its grave? Chapter 1. The Vanishing Convoy of Operation Eclipse. At dawn on April 28, 1945, the Linz marshalling yard trembled under the weight of a retreating empire. The 6th SS Technical Division, an obscure detachment of the Reich's Special Armaments Office, was ordered to prepare a final transport under the authority of Obersturmbannführer Kurt Reiner, a career engineer turned officer. The order came through Reich Security Directive 72B, signed by a hand no one could later identify. 7 trucks, matte grey and unmarked except for stenciled serials beginning with E4, were loaded with sealed crates, lead-lined barrels, and 2 cylindrical containers guarded by armed personnel from the Sonderkommando Schwarze Sonne. Civilian dock workers recalled the men's insignia, a sunwheel encircling the Reichsadler, something never listed in official military registries. At precisely 0540, the convoy departed west, cutting through the Danube mist under radio silence. A witness, a Hungarian conscript named János Albrecht, later testified in an OSS interrogation that he heard Reiner tell a subordinate, "If they catch us, they cannot find what we carry." The phrase was entered into the debrief file Horizon Alpine, later archived under Schaef Intelligence Section G2. By nightfall, the convoy had crossed into the foothills near Gmunden. It was there that they were last confirmed by Luftwaffe dispatch logs, which recorded an encoded call from Eclipse Column A. No record of Column B was ever found, suggesting the existence of at least 2 separate movements. Allied units advancing from the east reported no visual contact. Yet by April 30th, when Soviet forces entered Linz, the SS Technical Division had ceased to exist, its command structure dissolved, its records burned. Only a single manifest survived, half-scorched and incomplete, listing quantities of technical minerals, biological material, and reactor components. In early May, American reconnaissance patrols from the 11th Armored Division were dispatched toward the Salzkammergut region after intercepting Soviet traffic claiming unusual German convoys were seen near Bad Ischl. Their report, declassified in 1993, describes a destroyed column of Wehrmacht vehicles, none bearing Eclipse serials, and a series of cratered paths consistent with deliberate demolition. The area had been heavily mined. Dynamite charges were discovered along the ravines, suggesting the SS expected pursuit. A coded document fragment retrieved from one wreckage bore the line, "Destination Valhalla site confirmed. Entry protocol D7 active." Analysts never located a facility with that designation. Weeks later, a local farmer named Otto Grunwalder approached Allied command with what he claimed were fragments of the missing convoy: canvas straps, scorched uniforms, and a twisted steel container bearing embossed characters E04OB. His account, taken by US Counterintelligence Corps, described a metal road cutting into the mountainside that appeared overnight and vanished under landslide debris after a series of explosions. His sketches corresponded roughly to a remote valley south of Tauen Pass. When investigators reached the coordinates, they found only disturbed soil and traces of fused rock, suggesting temperatures beyond conventional explosives. Decades after the war, fragments of the Eclipse operation re-emerged through Cold War intelligence leaks. In 1961, the Bundesnachrichtendienst flagged a communication from a Soviet field office referencing recovered Eclipse artifacts, Zone K. American analysts interpreted this as evidence that Soviet forces may have recovered one or more containers. Photographic intelligence taken over a remote site near Kaprun revealed a fenced compound bearing heavy electromagnetic shielding and guarded by chemical protection units. Western observers speculated that the Soviets had seized either nuclear components or experimental alloys from the original convoy. What Lends the Eclipse file its haunting ambiguity are the testimonies of the few who claimed first-hand contact. One such witness, former US Army translator Captain Harold Vance, described reviewing a film reel marked Eclipse Confidential in an unheated warehouse outside Frankfurt in late 1946. According to his deposition, the footage depicted a series of cylindrical canisters being loaded by men in protective suits, something emitting light even through containment. The reel was confiscated 2 hours later by British liaison officers and never resurfaced in Allied archives. When Vance attempted to retrieve it in 1952, he was informed that Project Eclipse was absorbed into Anglo-American nuclear research, a claim neither government ever substantiated. In the Austrian National Archives, only one local record hints at the convoy's passage. A handwritten ledger from the Gmunden Railway Office noting foreign transport under the initials KR, with payment rendered in Reichsmarks from an account belonging to the Ahnenerbe Institute. The entry, dated 27 April, matches precisely the night before the convoy's departure, cross-referenced with captured SS documents. This suggests that Operation Eclipse was not merely an evacuation, but the culmination of an Ahnenerbe research project relocated from Thuringia during the final months of the war. What became of Obersturmbannführer Rainer remains another unresolved strand. He vanished from all post-war registries, yet a man fitting his description was photographed in Argentina in 1953 at a mining consortium linked to former Reich engineers. When questioned, the subject identified himself as Karl Reinhardt, consultant. No extradition followed. By 1972, renewed investigation into Nazi war technology led to the declassification of several Eclipse-related files by the US National Archives. Most were incomplete, their pages deliberately excised. Among the surviving fragments was a memo from 1945, referencing operation parameters in proximity to reactor, experimentation, and the use of portable shielding to contain radiological reaction. Experts interpreted this as a primitive nuclear transport attempt, perhaps components of a failed reactor or weapon design. Others believed it indicated something else, an attempt to secure Allied or foreign technology before surrender. The Austrian Geological Service, when surveying the Tauern Valley in 1988, recorded inexplicable subsurface anomalies in the same area where the convoy was believed to have vanished. Magnetic readings revealed metallic signatures embedded deep within limestone, highly dense, non-ferrous, and of unknown origin. When excavation was proposed, funding was abruptly withdrawn under heritage preservation restrictions. 3 months later, all relevant survey data disappeared from official records. Today, Eclipse occupies a liminal space between history and rumor. Military historians treat it as an unverified late-war logistics operation. Conspiracy researchers argue it was a smuggling route for advanced energy research. The truth likely lies in the quiet bureaucratic margins, the typed notes of men like Rainer, sealed in vaults, their meaning lost to decades of obfuscation. And yet, a final reference surfaced in 2005 from the US Defense Threat Reduction Agency's declassified communications log. An entry dated June 4, 1952 reads simply, "Recovered object, Tauern sector, transported to Ramstein. Eclipse terminated. No coordinates, no accompanying report. Only those words." For a generation of researchers, that single line remains both a clue and a curse, a reminder that even when wars end, their secrets rarely do. Chapter 2. The Murmansk Listening Station. In the spring of 1952, long after the official silence of victory had settled across Europe, Soviet trawlers began appearing in the frigid waters of the Barents Sea. Their rusted hulls bore civilian registry numbers, but naval intelligence knew better. One such vessel, the 7017, was transmitting coded bursts from an area 60 kilometers north of the Kola Peninsula. Officially, it was a meteorological ship. In reality, it served as a floating extension of Outpost Genit, a covert listening installation embedded deep within the frozen coastline east of Murmansk. Its purpose was not weather analysis, but interception. Genit was constructed in 1947 under the command of Major General Viktor Gromov of the 9th Directorate. It operated within the framework of Project Lyra, an initiative to reverse engineer captured German acoustic surveillance equipment from the Baltic Theatre. The Soviets had obtained partial designs for an advanced sonar array, allegedly recovered from a scuttled U-boat off Norway. Genit's technicians, Engineers drawn from the Leningrad Institute of Communications were tasked with reconstructing the array to detect NATO submarines approaching the Arctic frontier. By 1949, the site was operational. Disguised as a fisheries research station, its communications routed through Murmansk Naval District Channel 43. Documents unearthed from Soviet archives after the fall of the USSR described the outpost as self-sustaining, subterranean, with secondary transmission capability via hydrophone lattice. The hydrophone lattice extended beneath the permafrost into the Barents seabed. Its acoustic mapping range far exceeded any Western equipment of the time, and its engineers reported intercepting unclassified subaqueous phenomena, unexplained impulses, rhythmic and deliberate, inconsistent with submarine signatures. These signals, marked Code Vostok, were catalogued but never analysed publicly. On November 17, 1952, a seismic event was recorded 18 kilometers off the coast near Zenit. Within hours, the installation went silent. Soviet Northern Fleet records later reported an accidental detonation of stored munitions. Yet no weapons were ever listed in the station's inventory. Aerial reconnaissance taken days later revealed scorched terrain, an elliptical crater, and structural remnants twisted inward rather than outward, consistent with implosion. Within 48 hours, all personnel files connected to the outpost were sealed by the Ministry of State Security, MGB. The official narrative was clear. Outpost Zenit had ceased to exist. But beginning in 1953, Allied listening stations in Norway and the UK began intercepting intermittent radio bursts emanating from the same coordinates. The signals followed the exact transmission pattern once used by Zenit. Shortwave bursts at 1945 MHz, repeated every 47 minutes. Their content was unintelligible, groups of 5-digit numbers and sporadic bursts of static. The British Government Communications Headquarters, GCHQ, logged them as Murmansk anomalies. Declassified intercept logs from March 1954 show cross-reference notes comparing the broadcasts with the now-defunct Soviet outpost codes. The conclusion scribbled in the margin of one page reads simply, "Source station destroyed. Impossible origin." In 1955, a joint US-British analysis group, Project Arden, was established to investigate the anomaly. A team led by Dr. Lionel Havers, a physicist specializing in electromagnetic propagation, hypothesized that the transmissions might be signal echoes, reflected by ionospheric conditions. However, his technical report was suppressed after he proposed that the signals displayed time drift, delays inconsistent with natural reflection. In other words, each repeated transmission appeared to originate slightly earlier than the last, as though transmitting backward. Meanwhile, in the Soviet Union, the matter resurfaced briefly during an internal audit of Arctic operations. A classified memorandum, recovered years later from the KGB archives, recounts a 1960 inspection of a sealed bunker near Murmansk conducted under the guise of routine maintenance. The inspection party reported finding residual heat signatures emanating from beneath permafrost layers, despite sub-zero external temperatures. The bunker entrance was welded shut after the visit. Its official designation, Facility 23Z. By the 1970s, the legend of the Murmansk listening station had become an undercurrent among Western SIGINT analysts. Reports circulated of radio hobbyists picking up rhythmic bursts matching the old 1945 MHz pattern. The signals appeared during winter months, always around midnight GMT, lasting precisely 9 minutes. Amateur recordings confirmed their existence but failed to decode them. A 1978 NSA technical brief, later declassified under FOIA, contains the notation, possibly residual beacon from decommissioned Soviet monitoring site, no actionable intelligence. Yet appended to the document was a handwritten addendum, persistence of signal after 25 years unexplained. In 1982, a retired Soviet communications officer, Colonel Alexei Voronin, defected to Finland and was interviewed by Western intelligence. He claimed to have served as a consultant during the initial construction of Zenit and alleged that the outpost's mission changed in 1951 after receiving classified material recovered from German archives. He described one specific shipment, 2 crates marked with Reich Technical Office seals and labeled Akustisches Versuchsfeld, Obersalzberg, 1944. These contained experimental audio frequency resonators designed for submarine detection, developed in cooperation with AEG engineers. According to Voronin, Zenit engineers integrated these resonators into their hydrophone network. After that, he said, the sea began to answer back. The Voronin testimony was dismissed by most Western analysts as Cold War defector sensationalism, but his statements matched fragments of a confiscated Soviet document titled Report on Anomalous Signal Behavior, Station Z4. The report, translated in 1991, mentions intelligent patterning within the acoustic returns, and a final entry noting, recording halted due to escalating amplitude, possible system overload. Days later, the facility was destroyed. Attempts to locate the remains of Outpost Zenit after the Soviet collapse yielded only silence. Satellite imaging revealed nothing but tundra, rock, and remnants of a causeway leading into the sea. Yet in 2001, a Norwegian oceanographic expedition mapping the Barents seabed encountered a dense metallic structure at a depth of 92 meters. The sonar profile suggested a collapsed dome approximately 30 meters in diameter. Metallic readings were unusually high, and localized magnetic fields disrupted navigation instruments. When divers attempted to descend, communications failed abruptly. Their footage, recovered from an onboard recorder, displayed static, followed by a single frame of a lattice-like framework curving into darkness. In 2008, the Russian Ministry of Defense issued a restricted zone notice around the same coordinates, citing environmental instability. Unconfirmed reports suggest that Russian trawlers continue to monitor intermittent signals from that area. The frequency remains the same, 19.45 MEST weather outpost. Zenit was an advanced surveillance experiment gone wrong, or something that tapped into deeper frequencies of the Earth's polar oceans, is a matter of speculation. The Cold War bred countless technological ghosts, projects that blurred the line between science and superstition. Zenit stands among them, a silent monument to paranoia, secrecy, and the enduring echoes of an empire's listening post that refused to die. Chapter 3. The Shadow Archive of Prague. In May 1946, as Allied reconstruction missions combed through the wreckage of Europe, a team of British engineers assisting the Czechoslovak Ministry of Works uncovered a steel vault beneath the collapsed Old Town Hall in Prague. The vault had been hidden behind reinforced masonry and sealed with a German inscription, Archivum Umbra. Inside were hundreds of glass photographic plates, schematic diagrams, and correspondence folders stamped with overlapping insignia, Reich Main Security Office, RSHA, and Wehrmacht Weapons Office, Heereswaffenamt. The discovery was immediately classified. The Czechoslovak authorities allowed US Army intelligence, specifically G2 Section Prague, to take possession of the materials for temporary analysis. The crates were tagged Property Control File 2287 and shipped to a secure depot in Wiesbaden. None of the documents ever returned. The recovered papers suggested a convergence of fields: psychological warfare, propaganda engineering, and advanced communications. Among the blueprints was a device labeled Project Morgenlicht, or Project Morning Light. The diagrams depicted a network of broadcast units resembling shortwave transmitters but annotated with notes on neurological influence and behavioral reinforcement. Accompanying correspondence between RSHA officials and Ahnenerbe scientists referenced Phase 2 tests, Protectorate sector, implying experimental trials conducted during the occupation of Czechoslovakia. Civilian records from 1943 show unexplained population relocations from the district of Nové Město, consistent with the creation of a restricted test zone. OSS analysts in Wiesbaden initially dismissed the archive as Nazi pseudoscience. Yet one officer, Captain Walter Pritchard, noted a recurring cipher within the documents, alphanumeric, sequences beginning with H-times that matched fragments found in separate SS files recovered in Bavaria concerning frequency, entrainment. When Pritchard attempted to cross-reference the Prague documents, he was ordered to cease inquiry. Within months, Property Control File 2287 disappeared from inventory logs, its contents reclassified under a joint Anglo-American intelligence agreement, later identified as the Inter-Allied Technology Transfer Program. Local memory of the vault faded, but rumors persisted among municipal workers who had witnessed the excavation. One described an inner chamber within the vault that the British never opened, sealed by a copper door welded from the inside. According to his account, the door emitted low vibrations when struck. By 1947, reconstruction filled the site with concrete. When interviewed decades later, he recalled hearing a hum, faint but alive, long after the vault had been sealed. In 1965, during a wave of defections following the collapse of certain Eastern Bloc research bureaus, a Czechoslovak physicist named Dr. Ludwig Vesely surfaced in Vienna. He carried with him microfilm reels labeled Morgenlicht, Phase 3. Vesely claimed to have worked at a state institute tasked with decrypting Nazi technical materials. His films contained fragments of the same archive, removed from Prague in 1946. Among them were handwritten pages describing transmission of suggestive content via modulated carrier, waves and induction of collective perceptual shifts. One diagram showed concentric circles labeled Feld effect, field effect. Vesely insisted that post-war Soviet and Czech research divisions had continued the experiments under new designations, exploring whether low-frequency electromagnetic broadcasts could alter human cognitive patterns. He died under unclear circumstances 3 weeks later, his hotel room ransacked and reels missing. Only one copy remained, recovered by Western intelligence and archived in Langley, Virginia, as MK Echo Prague. Declassified fragments of that file suggest that Western researchers indeed examined the Morgenlicht concept as part of Cold War psychological operations. A 1952 memorandum from the Office of Scientific Intelligence references previous German studies in applied psychophysics, sources, Prague and Oranienburg, and concludes that elements may prove relevant to long-range behavior influence via non-lethal means. Subsequent pages are redacted in full. The existence of MK Echo was denied by the US government until its accidental disclosure in 1998. In 1973, construction workers renovating cellars beneath Prague's astronomical clock stumbled upon a sealed metal cabinet embedded in the masonry. Inside were 9 nitrate film canisters and a rusted projector bearing Wehrmacht inventory markings. The reels, when restored by the National Film Archive, revealed grainy footage of men in SS uniforms standing before large radio dishes, intercut with scenes of civilians gathered in a square, staring motionless toward a loudspeaker. Audio tests found the film's soundtrack carried inaudible low-frequency tones that distorted magnetic tape during playback. The reels were confiscated 2 days after discovery by government agents. Officially, they were deemed unstable nitrate waste and destroyed, though no disposal record exists. Throughout the 1980s, dissident Czech historians attempted to reconstruct the story of Archivum Umbra through oral testimonies and scattered archival notes. One researcher, Pavel Krasny, claimed to have located remnants of the original British inventory list from 1946, which described photographic documentation of experiment subjects 24A, 24K. The descriptions matched the film footage: rows of citizens, unresponsive, faces blank, eyes reflecting an artificial light source. Krasny vanished in 1986 en route to a conference in Vienna. His suitcase, recovered from a Prague rail station, contained a single undeveloped film negative showing the old town hall ruins, and faintly visible on one wall, the words Morgenlicht lebt, morning light lives. After the Velvet Revolution of 1989, Czech security archives briefly opened their wartime sections to journalists. Within the RSHA microfilm copies was an unlisted reel containing the last known document bearing the Morgenlicht code name, a memorandum from SS Standartenführer Erich Naumann to Heinrich Himmler dated February 1945. It read, "The Prague array demonstrates unprecedented coherence between transmitter and human response, awaiting approval for field deployment. Psychological unity achievable within minutes." The message was intercepted by Allied codebreakers but never acted upon. Why it resurfaced remains unclear. To this day, historians debate whether Project Morgenlicht represented an early attempt at mass hypnosis through radio frequencies or merely another of the Reich's pseudo-scientific obsessions. Yet every mention of it in post-war records disappears under identical circumstances: pages redacted, personnel transferred, archives sealed. In 2011, a European research consortium surveying electromagnetic pollution in historic urban centres detected a consistent low-frequency emission beneath Prague's Old Town, resonating between 15 and 17 Hz. The source could not be pinpointed. The technicians noted that the signal ceased the moment the sensors crossed the foundations of the town hall. There, beneath centuries of stone and silence, the shadow archive of Prague may still pulse faintly. Its purpose forgotten, its language erased, but its signal perhaps never truly gone. Chapter 4. The Lost Airfield at Lake Balaton. By late 1944, the Hungarian plains had become a graveyard of steel and ambition. As the Red Army advanced westward, the Luftwaffe sought refuge deep within the Carpathian Basin. South of Lake Balaton, near the village of Samalek, a new airfield began to take shape beneath layers of secrecy and propaganda. It was codenamed Flugfeld Dora 13. Few outside the Luftwaffe's technical division ever knew of its existence. The project was overseen by Oberst Hans Ulrich Gessner, an engineer previously attached to the Peenemünde Research Complex. His orders, signed by the Reichsluftfahrtministerium and countersigned by SS Obergruppenführer Hans Kammler, authorized the construction of a remote testing site for unconventional propulsion systems. The airfield did not appear on any military map. Its runways were concealed beneath camouflage netting stretched over wooden trellises, and its approach paths cut through marshland so treacherous that vehicles often disappeared beneath the mud. Locals were forbidden from entering the region under penalty of death. The labor force consisted of prisoners from the Koseg subcamp of Mauthausen, transported weekly under SS guard. By December 1944, Dora 13 was operational, or so the surviving reports claim. The installation's radio designation was Delta 13 Rot, transmitting on 45.6 MHz using coded call signs that changed every 72 hours. Rumors circulated among Hungarian civilians of aircraft without wings that rose vertically from the ground with a deafening hum. Some said they emitted a blue halo before vanishing into clouds. These stories, dismissed as wartime exaggeration, resurfaced after the war when declassified Allied aerial reconnaissance photographs revealed a pattern of circular clearings etched into the landscape, perfectly symmetrical and charred, as if scorched by immense heat. The site's destruction was deliberate. When Soviet troops reached the area in March 1945, they found only flooded craters and the skeletal remains of hangars. Gessner and his staff had vanished. In the post-war years, Dora 13 became a whispered myth within aviation circles. Engineers who examined captured Luftwaffe documents noted references to Project Schwalbe II, a development related to the Messerschmitt Me 262 jet, but using rotational field propulsion. The technology was never replicated. Yet buried in the Hungarian National Archives lies a 1946 interrogation transcript of a captured German technician, Karl Dieterle, who described a prototype aircraft known as Gerät V7B. According to Dieterle, the craft utilized a magnetic torque drive powered by liquid metal current. When asked about the test results, he replied, "It flew once, and it never came back down in one piece." Soviet engineers occupying the region recovered fragments of highly unusual alloys from the marshes near Kestely. Reports from the 9th Guards Mechanized Army mention non-ferrous metals with extreme heat resistance, sent to the NII 88 Institute for study, the same research center that would later oversee the Soviet missile program. Whatever they found there was never shared with the Hungarians. In 1963, Hungarian geophysicist Dr. Miklos Hederi requested permission to survey the Balaton Basin for residual radiation anomalies, claiming local fishermen had recovered melted plates from lake sediments. 2 weeks later, his expedition vanished. Only his assistant's journal survived, recovered from a capsized boat near Tihany. The final entry read, "Metal beneath water, not Soviet, still warm." In 1970, an internal report by the Hungarian People's Army noted the presence of strong magnetic interference, affecting radio transmissions in the area once known as Dora 13. The report classified the disturbance as geophysical, anomaly of unknown origin. It recommended the suspension of civilian mining near the site. Around this same period, NATO reconnaissance flights over the region recorded faint radar echoes inconsistent with the terrain, ghost reflections that appeared briefly, then vanished. Western analysts dismissed them as atmospheric distortion. Nevertheless, the coordinates of the disturbance matched those of the long-lost airfield. Archival traces of Dora 13's original construction lead back to Peenemünde's Einsatzgruppe Kammler, a division responsible for transferring advanced research to secure Alpine and Hungarian locations after the Allied bombing of northern Germany. Surviving documentation suggests that the Balaton site was intended not merely for aircraft testing, but for a mobile power generation system utilizing field inversion. Some theorists link this to speculative research into high-speed electromagnetic drives. No conclusive evidence has surfaced, but the parallels between Dora 13's equipment lists and those of late-war energy projects like Project Kronos are too close to ignore. Local legends evolved from the mystery. Residents spoke of nights when the lake's surface would ripple under windless skies, and an eerie hum could be heard resonating across the water. Shepherds reported compasses spinning erratically. In 1984, a journalist from Budapest attempted to write an exposé on the site, claiming to possess original blueprints of the airfield. He disappeared before publication. His apartment was ransacked, and the drafts confiscated by authorities citing national security reasons. When the Iron Curtain fell, no trace of his work remained in any archive. Modern investigations have yielded only fragments. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted in 1998 revealed linear metallic structures buried deep beneath the marshes, consistent with reinforced airstrips. Samples extracted from nearby sediment layers contained traces of an aluminum-titanium composite unknown in the 1940s. Historians argue these results could easily be contamination from later industrial activity. Yet engineers examining the data point out that the formations are aligned in a pattern precisely matching early Luftwaffe airfield design, except inverted. Runways built below ground level, shielded from aerial view. The absence of official acknowledgement fuels speculation that Dora 13 may have been a testing site for radical flight systems, technologies, lost or suppressed in the chaos of Germany's defeat. What remains is a patchwork of contradictory testimony, redacted reports, and whispered recollections. When questioned in 1992, a retired Soviet officer who served near Balaton in 1945 admitted that his unit had found something metallic in the lake, something we were ordered never to speak of. His description, smooth as glass, curved like an egg, remains the last known first-hand reference to the site's hidden machinery. In recent years, Hungary's National Archives quietly digitized a series of wartime Luftwaffe telegrams once thought destroyed. One message dated 14th February 1945 reads, "Field D-13 operational. Initial flight at 2300 hours. Parameters unstable but effective. Awaiting Kamler's presence for confirmation." It ends with a single code phrase, Adler steigt. The eagle rises. Whether Dora 13 was an engineering failure, an experimental triumph buried under defeat, or merely an illusion conjured by collapsing command structures, no definitive record survives. The swamp that swallowed its runways remains a silent witness. At dusk, when the lake turns mirror still, locals say you can still hear a faint mechanical whine from beneath the water, a ghost of technology from a war that refused to die. Chapter 5. The Tribunal that never convened. In the spring of 1948, 3 years after the last Nuremberg verdicts were read, a quiet initiative was underway within the Office of Military Government, United States, OMGUS, codenamed Tribunal 17B. The operation aimed to prosecute a select group of former Reich economic officials and industrialists accused of orchestrating forced labor programs in the occupied territories. Unlike the high-profile trials that had captured the world's attention, B was to be conducted behind closed doors, its proceedings shielded from public scrutiny. Preparations began in Munich under Colonel Raymond L. Winchell of the U.S. Judge Advocate General's Corps. The defendants, 12 in number, were held at the Langwasser internment facility. Their names never appeared in the press. According to declassified State Department communications, the defendants were not mere bureaucrats, but technical administrators linked to the Reich's Economic Office of Armaments, men with expertise in logistics, metallurgy, and industrial planning. Among them was Dr. Otto Drexler, an engineer known for designing subterranean manufacturing networks that had kept the German war machine alive, even as Allied bombers reduced its cities to rubble. His name appeared repeatedly in reports concerning Project Eisenader, the Iron Vein, a secret system of underground railways and storage depots stretching across southern Germany and Austria. The facilities were intended to conceal both weapons stockpiles and advanced research installations from advancing Allied troops. After the war, Much of Eisenach's infrastructure was absorbed by occupying forces for reconstruction use. By June 1948, the prosecution had assembled a comprehensive case file: witness statements from surviving laborers, technical diagrams from captured SS archives, and minutes from high-level meetings documenting Drexler's role in coordinating transport of special materials between Thuringia and Bavaria in late 1944. Yet within weeks of its completion, the tribunal was abruptly dissolved. An order from Washington, Army Directive G12, mandated the postponement of proceedings pending review by higher authority. The defendants were quietly removed from custody and reassigned to industrial reconstruction units operating under new identities. Internal memos reveal that at least 4 were later relocated to Argentina under Operation Paperclip derivatives managed by civilian contractors. In 1951, a Senate Oversight Committee attempted to locate the missing tribunal files. Their request was denied. A letter from the Department of Defense explained that documentation relating to certain industrial collaborators has been reclassified under cooperative technology agreements. No further details were provided. The committee's report concluded, with evident frustration, that the historical record of post-war economic justice remains incomplete. Behind closed doors, the issue was quietly buried. It was not until 1979 that fragments of the Tribunal WWII proceedings resurfaced. A retired archivist from the US Army, Harold Vann, revealed the existence of microfilm transcripts labeled OMGU NBG T12B 40 Vann claimed he discovered them while cataloguing obsolete storage reels at a facility in Fort Belvoir. The transcripts, now partially declassified, contain segments of witness examinations describing the existence of a gentleman's understanding between Allied occupation authorities and select German industrialists. One passage reads, "In exchange for cooperation in technical debriefings and post-war production planning, prosecution may be deferred indefinitely." Another line, struck through by hand, mentions industrial resources of extraordinary strategic value, relocated to secure Western custody. The Drexler testimony stands out for its unsettling candor. When asked about his wartime logistics work, he responded, "We moved not only machinery, but knowledge, entire systems of energy, metallurgy, and calculation. The Reich fell, but the work was not lost. It simply changed flags." The questioning officer, Major Samuel Forbes, pressed further, but the transcript ends abruptly with the notation, "Session terminated by directive." Rumors began to circulate among historians and journalists that the cancellation of Tribunal WWII was linked to Western rearmament efforts and the onset of the Cold War. Evidence suggests that American and British intelligence agencies sought to preserve German industrial expertise to bolster Europe's recovery and counterbalance Soviet expansion. The moral calculus of justice was subordinated to pragmatism. In one confidential letter dated November 1948, an OMGUS official writes, "Convictions would only impede progress. The future demands capable hands, not symbolic trials." Further supporting this interpretation are several financial ledgers recovered from the Bank Deutsche Länder archives. They detail discrete fund transfers from defunct Reich agencies to newly incorporated companies in Frankfurt and Hamburg. Many of these firms, established in 1949 and 1950, would later become key suppliers for NATO contracts. Cross-referencing corporate records reveals striking overlaps with the personnel listed in the sealed Soyuz B indictment. The implication was clear. The same men who had engineered wartime production networks were now rebuilding Western Europe under Allied supervision. In Argentina, another thread emerged. Declassified intelligence reports from the 1960s reference a German expatriate named Dr. Karl Otto, employed by an industrial consortium in Cordoba. Photographic analysis later identified him as Otto Drexler. When approached by journalists in 1972, Drexler declined to comment on his wartime activities, stating only, "History is written by the victors, and I helped them write it." He died in 1976. His personal papers were seized by local authorities and later transferred to unidentified foreign consultants. Modern historians attempting to reconstruct the WWII narrative encounter a maze of redactions and vanished archives. In 1998, a Freedom of Information request filed by researchers at the University of Munich yielded a single document, an unsigned memorandum from July 1948 titled the Silent Agreement of 47 Daum. It outlined an arrangement between Allied representatives and former Reich economic managers, guaranteeing immunity in exchange for complete transfer of industrial knowledge and assets beneficial to post-war stabilization. Its authenticity remains contested, yet the language mirrors phrasing found in contemporary Anglo-American trade discussions. Ethically, Tribunal Toiti's B's disappearance represents one of the most profound silences in the post-war record. Justice, deferred for expedience, mutated into quiet collaboration. The United States and its allies, in their urgency to rebuild Europe and confront the Soviet Union, inherited not only Germany's engineers, but also its moral compromises. The victims of forced labor received neither acknowledgement nor restitution from the men who profited from their suffering. The very concept of accountability evaporated into bureaucratic ambiguity. Even now, references to WWII appear occasionally in marginal footnotes of declassified intelligence correspondence, never as a topic of research, always as a cautionary term. One 1964 CIA training manual warns analysts to avoid repeating the errors of WWII when information outweighs ideals. It offers no explanation. Of the Tribunal's original evidence, only one known artifact survives, a wooden crate found in 2002 in a disused American storage depot near Wiesbaden. Inside were charred folders stamped Economic Office Case and a brass nameplate engraved O. Drexler. The crate's inventory list bore a final entry, case materials, disposed per directive. The date beside it was August 12, 1948, the same week the tribunal was officially dissolved. What remains of Tribunal Toithin B is not a verdict, but an absence, a legal proceeding that never happened, a reckoning postponed until memory itself grew tired. In that silence, the line between justice and convenience blurred beyond recognition, leaving behind a legacy that whispers through declassified margins, that some wars never truly end, they only change jurisdiction. For 70 years, the archives of Europe and America have whispered the same unease. Files sealed, names redacted, stories abruptly ending. The convoy that vanished into the Austrian fog, the outpost in Murmansk that kept transmitting from the dead, the Prague vault whose signal still hums beneath centuries of stone, the airfield that sank under Lake Balaton's silence, and the tribunal that was never allowed to speak. Each fragment leads to another locked door, another forgotten oath between victors and ghosts. Perhaps history buried these secrets not to hide what happened, but to keep us from asking why. Because once opened, some records don't close again.